Hello and welcome to Real Menopause Talk. My guest today is Chana Studley, and I can't wait to introduce you to her. It's been a challenging few weeks, to say the least, around the world, and I still continue to choose to put out the podcast, largely down to what my guest today said to me. It's also been a personally challenging few weeks with a very busy time, and I had a full perimenopause meltdown a few days ago where I wanted to punch through walls and slam doors, the second of which I actually did a few times. Talking to a therapist doesn't require a full meltdown like I had. Mental health is far more subtle. And feeling low all the time, something that we discussed today, not feeling like yourself, and you know what that means, or even just needing to talk it out, get it out in the open so that you can move on with your day, can be so important. Naming what is troubling you and having someone help you see it for what it is can change the way you feel completely. That is why I am offering you real menopause therapy, and for now, subscription is free. Sign up and enjoy half an hour for free as well. You get to handpick your therapist based on matching your health concerns, let's say menopause, with their expertise, your work environment, so they understand the unique pressures you face. Perhaps they used to work in your industry. And even interests, from cave diving to coffee roasting, weightlifting to creative writing. So you find someone who really gets you. No obligation, no tie-in, just therapy that fits into your schedule and can bring you back to the real and fabulous you. Go to bit.ly/RM therapy now. That's bit.ly, bit.ly/RM therapy, capital R, capital M, capital T, now. And now, the moment you've been waiting for, Chana Studley. When I spoke to her, it was uncomfortably close to the beginning of the most recent conflicts in Israel. I was so surprised when she told me where she was and that she felt able to talk about menopause. But that is Chana for me, present, calm, giving, accepting of what she cannot control, and willing to share her insights so that others may benefit. In this episode, we talk about her illustrious career in special effects in Hollywood, her 10-year perimenopause, which had points of really suffering, including the brain fog when she feared Alzheimer's, and describes her thinking through molasses. The difference between feeling depressed and having depression. If only people could learn not to be afraid of their own experience, that would change the world. And here she is, living and leading by example in a war zone. It's true food for thought. I didn't realize you were in Jerusalem. How are you? And I'm so sorry to hear about everything over the last 24 hours or so.
Yeah, it's I'm in probably the safest place in Israel right now because I can see the Supreme Court building out my window. I'm in the heart of Jerusalem. The Parliament buildings are right there. The President's house is a few blocks away. But even so, we had a siren about 2 hours ago where this is my bedroom behind this wall here, which is a safe room, like a rocket safe room. And so I was in there. There were booms loud enough to shake the building. So yeah, it's sadly we're kind of used to it, but this is probably the worst it's ever been. I mean, I've been here 15 years, and they say this is the worst since the Yom Kippur War. So,
goodness,
yeah, thank you for your kind thoughts and
concern. No, I'm sure everybody wishes you safety and for peace as soon as possible. And I'm really sorry that you're going through all of that. I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
I've read a little bit, but I would like everybody else to know. Can you explain your pain story?
Yeah, I had a pain story. It's so funny to say it like that. I was in a lot of violent situations in my early 20s. I was mugged 3 times. My skull was fractured. My neck was broken. The bones, thank God, not the spinal cord. 3 herniated discs from another attack. And they were all like just, they were frightening. I thought I was going to die, but muggings in the street, they were from people I didn't know. They was just attacked in the street. And I received quite serious injuries from all of these. And so for the next 25 years, I had terrible pains. My back would seize up. I'd have sciatica pain shooting down my legs. I used to describe myself as Audrey Hepburn on one side and Marilyn Monroe on the other side. I'd be so twisted out of shape and bent forward. I had a walking stick by the time I was 27. Every time I go to doctors and osteopaths and chiropractors, they would always take a medical history and they would tell me, oh, well, no wonder your arm is going numb because that's where the nerve for your arm comes out of your neck where your neck was broken. Or, well, you have three herniated discs, so that's why, you have an unstable pelvis and that's why you have pain in your legs. And I was paralyzed several times. I lived in California for many years. I worked in the film business. And I was taken from movie sets and workshops, almost paralyzed, screaming in pain to the emergency room. And I always thought that my pain was coming from these injuries. But about 8 years ago, I started researching because I came across a new paradigm in psychology, which is what my books are all about. And as I started to train and understand this more, my pain went away. And not just my back pain and neck pain, but IBS, eczema, asthma, all kinds of severe allergies. They've all pretty much disappeared. I've been pain free for about 8 years now. So I started to research the mind body connection and what pain really is. And I discovered that my injuries had actually healed 20 something years ago. All injuries heal within 4 to 6 weeks under normal circumstances. So why was I having pain all that time? And I now know that my body was screaming at me to slow down. I was so, I didn't realize how anxious I was now until it's actually gone away because it had kind of become normal. But I was so up in my head with, not wanting to make a mistake, trying to be perfect, get you to like me, all that kind of insecurity stuff that I wasn't really present in my life, even though I was having this amazing life, working in Hollywood. I was always up in my head worrying. And so my body was kind of screaming at me to slow down and be present. So it's very clear to me now why my pain went away, because as I became calmer and felt safer and my thinking slowed down, then my body didn't need to keep screaming at me anymore. And so the pain has gone away and it's rarely come back. If it comes back, it's kind of like a little tap on my shoulder. Careful, what direction are you going in? Be careful what you're doing. You're getting up in your head, and so it's the pain story has kind of had a happy ending. I didn't know it could go away. I thought this was going to be my lot for life. And it's not. I feel stronger today than I ever have. So it's amazing.
That is so completely extraordinary. And I'm sure so many people listening have experienced pain, whether it's breaking a bone or a myriad of other things, certainly something like endometriosis or fibroids. So the fact that you have cured your own pain that way is exceptional and just brilliant. I've not really encountered it so closely before. I've heard sort of mythical stories, but this is really fantastic. The physical is obvious when we're talking about peri to post menopause. The mental is often less talked about, although I feel coming to the forefront, which is great. And you refer to, really the unification of mind, body and spirit in your work. Even teaching yoga, I teach the releasing of emotions through physical movement. Joining the two shouldn't be necessary because they are already joined. So tell us about your work with mind, body and spirit all working as one.
Yeah, thank you. What I came across was some ideas that were put together by a man called Sydney Banks. He's passed away now, but he was very active in the 70s and 80s. He himself had what you could call an enlightenment experience. He had spent his life feeling very insecure. And on some retreat, his wife had dragged him to in the 1970s, like they were all into banging pillows and, self-realization, all that stuff back then. And he was hating it. And the story goes, he wandered outside and there was another guy who'd been dragged by his wife and was hating it. And he told this stranger that, he'd spent his life feeling insecure. And the stranger said to him, "You're not insecure. You just think you are." And it kind of went boom, in his head, like he saw through this story that we all carry around about who we think we are. Like I was the girl who was mugged 3 times, that kind of became my identity. I was the girl who worked in Hollywood. It's like we can attach ourselves to certain things. And sometimes they're not such positive things, could be trauma, could be pain. And what he taught was that we all have innate well-being. Everybody is innately well. And even I think he's pointing to mental health in that kind of statement. But I've seen my physical health was way better than I thought it was. Here I was in pain with IBS and the itching from the psoriasis and I almost lost my eyesight at one time. Many people get migraines, dizziness, nausea. And yet really it's the nervous system that's being revved up like a signal. It's an alarm system. And when I was studying the pain research, so many people, especially chiropractors, they're taught that our body has incredible wisdom to heal itself. And so as I was writing my previous book, which is called Painless, which is the chronic pain story, I suddenly had this insight. If the divine creator, intelligence of the universe, whatever you want to call that, created our bodies with incredible wisdom to heal, if my mind was created by the same intelligence, wouldn't have it created my mind with a system to heal as well? Well, it did, right? So the way my mind can heal itself is by slowing down. Most anxiety, stress, depression, whatever you want to call that, even boredom, is a busy mind. It's a mind that's gotten too caught up in itself, and we're not present in the moment, present in our bodies, and we're up in our heads, like overthinking, stressful thinking, whatever you want to call it. And then the nervous system is designed to get our attention, maybe with a stomach ache, shoulders sore, whatever it is. And when I see that now, and my awareness is kind of tuned into that, my thinking slows down. The pain goes away because it was only a message, and I can come out of the story or whatever it is I've got myself caught up in and be present back in the moment again. It's an incredible system, and we innocently don't understand it. For years, I innocently kept doing tools and techniques, and I was doing meditation and expressive writing and writing gratitude lists, and like Course in Miracles and the Enneagram, you name it. I was trying all these things, innocently trying to help myself feel better. But what I know now is that I was never broken. I didn't need fixing. So all that busy work was actually kind of messing with the system. So when you know that you're not broken and you have innate well-being, then it's a much calmer, safer, peaceful life to live. And that's what I share with people, that that we're not broken and we don't need fixing.
Having read your book and applied the principles of slowing down and noticing your thoughts and very much paying attention to the thoughts as the drivers of how you respond to things and how you feel about things and how you feel certainly about maybe an emotion like anger or frustration, it has really changed the way I feel about an awful lot of things. My guess is that some people listening are just going to think, well, surely this is too good to be true. How does it work so quickly? Because it does have an effect as soon as you begin to pay attention.
Well, I kind of see it like a smoke alarm, for example. There's a fire in the house and the smoke alarm goes off. And you could go like, wow, that's amazing. Smoke alarms are so clever. We didn't have those when I was a kid. Maybe I need to change the batteries. No, it's not a time to kind of start analyzing how amazing smoke alarms are. It's information. Get out of there, call the emergency number, find the fire exit. So now when I become aware, now it's not always pain. I think for me now, pain is like the smoke alarm. But you can probably smell smoke, see smoke long before it gets that bad that the sirens are going off. So now I really kind of notice when the quality of my thinking is starting to go downhill. Like there's certain stories or phrases that will pop up in my consciousness. Like we all have those core insecure stories. And mine will start with, no one understands. It never works out. It always ends up this way. It's kind of very black and white, heavy, negative things. And even before that, I can usually feel the heaviness of my thinking. There's usually an intensity. maybe an urgency element to it. And so all of those kind of thoughts have a feeling to them. They feel heavy. And that often gets my attention now luckily before it gets so bad that my pain, the pain comes and my body starts hurting, because that's, and in 8 years that hasn't really happened. Like just a couple of times when, I've got a bit of a twinge and like, oh, what's going on? Relax. And it always passes. That's the other thing that I found so helpful, is that whatever stinky thought we're having, whatever bad mood, broken heart, whatever feelings and thoughts we're having are going to move. It's the nature of spiritual energy. It's always moving. Thought is a spiritual energy. It always moves on. So even if we get caught up in something, like right now, I'm in a tricky situation with, living in a country that's at war. And, when the siren goes off and there's booms and explosions and airplanes going over, I think it's normal and natural to be a little bit cautious and apprehensive and, go hide in the shelter and things. Common sense tells me to take care of myself. But right now there's some sunshine, and it's relatively quiet, a little eerie quiet. And so I can be in the moment with you, and I'm okay. But if I sit here and start worrying, what if, my body's going to start telling me that I'm not present pretty soon. So I appreciate talking to you, because now I'm right here in the moment, and that's all we really have.
It's so interesting that you say emotions can feel heavy, or responses to a certain situation can feel heavy,
Mhm.
because that certainly resonates very strongly with me, and I'm sure it will with others as well. And you just feel it's all part of the mood swings, or maybe the anxiety that traditionally at the moment go hand in hand with perimenopausal symptoms. Why did you choose to write a novel about the menopause experience rather than another how-to book or something a little bit more scientific?
Yeah, it's actually my third novel. I mean, I've been a coach and a counselor for 30 years. I trained in Manchester with Manchester Rape Crisis Centre in the 1980s. And it's kind of alarming now to think at the time, there was only two in the country, one in London, one in Manchester. And we were trained to answer the hotline, to go and do counselling, to talk to nurses and lawyers and policemen, people who come in contact with women who are in crisis. In fact, I even went to Manchester Crown Court a couple of times, as an advocate with women. So I've been doing this a long time. And I wrote a kind of manual type, book many years ago. And it was way too teachy and preachy. It's like nobody needs nobody needs to hear from me like wagging their finger at them. So I kind of set it aside, and then they often say everybody has a book inside of them. Like we all have like at least one book. And many people had said to me, you should write a book. Sometimes they say it because of the trauma I went through, and I was a trauma coach for a lot of that time. Some say it to me because of my Hollywood experiences. I worked on really big movies with, mega famous people, and, you should write about that. Or I've lived in 3 continents, I've moved countries many times, so I could write about that. So I secretly kind of smushed it all together and wrote the first book, thinking that would be the only book I ever wrote. And I kind of made it into a story. I had a alter ego. Her name's Deborah. She's not me, but she uses a lot of my stories, in the books. And I thought that would be the only book I ever wrote. And then when I handed the manuscript to a friend of mine to read over and just give me some feedback. And as soon as I kind of let go of this secret that project I was working on, the next day my head went kind of like boom, boom, boom. And I had all these ideas for about 5 more books, right? It's like Deborah kind of becomes like she's in the next two, and now she's kind of like a minor character and other people are coming in. So the second book was about the chronic pain situation, because that, when I noticed my pain had gone away, that was really on my mind, and I was researching that a lot. And then when I came across these ideas, these 3 principles, I was actually going through menopause. My perimenopause lasted about 10 years. I really, really stuck it out with trying to do alternative stuff, and I'm really not into telling anybody how they should handle their menopause. Everybody needs, to be informed and educated, and, make their own decisions. That's not kind of what the books are about. When I came across these ideas, I was really suffering. I had brain fog, and it wasn't just like brain fog where you find mayonnaise in the freezer kind of, silly stuff. It was brain fog where I just couldn't think it was like in the book I say it's like thinking through molasses.
Mm-hmm.
Simple things that I knew how to do. I could not find the words in my head. I felt like I had Alzheimer's or something. It was really frightening. My hot flushes were up to 20 minutes apart, which is very hard to function if like every 20 minutes you're having fever. I remember sweat dripping off my nose. And then towards the end, I was getting like dizzy spells before each hot flush,
Mm-hmm.
where I'd like, like as if like, like you just taken my batteries out,
Yeah.
like I was, I sometimes had to grab hold of a table or the wall as I would have fallen over. Very hard to function. And I remember thinking then, I don't care if any medication gives me breast cancer. I can't live like this. And the story in the book that, where Helen, the main character, she goes to the doctor and the doctor starts to write her prescription for antidepressants.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually happened to me. My doctor's amazing. He's probably one of the best doctors I've ever had. But when I went to him with the menopause symptoms, he immediately started writing a prescription for antidepressants. And I remember sitting there and I said to him, but I'm not depressed. I love my life. I just don't know how to live it right now. It's very hard to function when you're not sleeping because you're being woken up multiple times a night. You've got
Mm-hmm.
fever all the time. You can't think straight. And he said to me, well, you've just told me that you want to cry all the time, eat chocolate and hide in your room. And I remember saying to him, what woman doesn't? you know, so um, I never took the prescription because I know that I don't have depression. I had my hormones were doing a dance, and I was innocently making it worse by reacting to them. And when I started researching the book, that's what I started finding out. And I think that's why even my menopause symptoms started to go away. When I started to understand how human experience is created and how hormones kind of play into that, and understanding that relationship really, really helped me to find peace and calm and clarity.
Understanding it is absolutely critical. And the way you describe that particular page where Helen goes to the doctor and says she's not depressed but feels like crying all the time, I loved reading that because I have felt that so often. And I'm familiar with
Mm-hmm.
depression, but I am not depressed. I am not suffering from depression at the moment. I just have a few days where
Mm-hmm.
I just want to cry all the time. And I know I'm not alone. That just sprung out for me as something. The dizziness is really interesting because so last year I fainted and broke my cheekbone and my orbital bone, and had to have surgery to kind of fix it all back together. I now realize that that must have been hormonal. And my new thing for the last 2 weeks is vertigo. But having had a number of seminars with women who've come to me saying, oh my goodness, I feel like the whole world is being tipped upside down sometimes, and it's been diagnosed as vertigo. I'm not scared of it. I had maybe 24 hours of thinking I had a brain tumor and I was going to die. But then after that,
Right.
decided that no, this is just hormonal. It is got to be okay. And I just have to manage it from time to time and yeah, hold on to the walls or whatever's nearby me. And it's not frightening. So
Mm-hmm.
that alone has been thinking a different way. I think if I were terrified still, then it might be a different matter. Can we talk a little bit about the mental health side of it and the way that you have to reframe your thoughts? Because you go into it in your novel and the three principles. Can you give the listeners just a glimpse into how that really operates?
Yeah, it really isn't about reframing or managing or controlling our thoughts. These are all things that, like, by the way, if people find that helpful, I'm not into twisting anybody's arm. We don't want anyone to suffer. So if people find something that's helpful to them, that's fantastic. If you're getting relief and peace that way. But what I found was when I was trying all those kinds of things, they worked temporarily. I call it the pink paint method because, like, imagine you bought a chair from a secondhand store, and it's rotten, but you paint it pink and it looks pretty for a while. But the rot is still there, and it's going to show through. So what I found is all those kind of tools and techniques that I was very proficient at, were kind of like sticking a plaster or a band-aid on it. They were always trying to like temporary fixes. And what I found is much better is to kind of go deeper and understand how it works. Because when you understand how something works, that's that phrase like give a man a fish and you can feed him for a day, teach a man how to fish and he can feed his family in the world. So that's like kind of my motivation for teaching this. So what I really learned was that we all have innate well-being, and we live in a thought-created world 100% of the time. And so that means that I'm only ever feeling my thinking about my circumstances. For the longest time, I thought that my relationships, my job, my family, politics, noisy neighbors, whatever it was, I thought they're creating the way I feel, my mood, my well-being is dependent on other people behaving, things being the way I want them to be. And that kind of leads you into being a victim of your circumstances, really. I can only be okay if they behave, if the boyfriend comes back, or my mom, leaves me alone, or whatever it is I think is going to make me feel better. But that's actually a very innocent misunderstanding, because we actually live from the inside out. Often people talk about it being an inside job or an internal experience. So what that really means is we're only ever feeling our thinking about our jobs, or our pain, or our dizziness, or our family, or our noisy neighbors, or whatever it is that we think is bothering us. And this is good news, because if it's those outside things, then we've got a big job on our hands to control and manage that outside life. And many of us have tried that. That's what a lot of my self-help was about, time management and anger management and writing the expressive stuff, like, emotions and feelings. And it's exhausting. But when you start to understand that we're only ever feeling our thoughts about those things, and you see that thought is always moving, it's a constant flow, it's a spiritual energy. And I've no idea what I'm saying right now. This is usually when I start moving my hands around, because how does anyone explain spiritual energy? I don't know. But I know that energy moves. And so every stinky thought, every broken heart, everything, every thought I've ever had, and they say we have something like 80 or 90,000 thoughts a day, maybe more. They're constantly moving through my mind. Now, most of those thoughts are kind of inconsequential. They're like, do the laundry, I don't want to, like some of them are just kind of like talking in the background there, I can't see my hand, but I know I can feel it moving around. Thoughts are like that, but some are very sticky. And when we're, being attacked by our hormones, it feels like we're being attacked. And it feels like, the world is against us, and we want to cry all the time. And then if I used to overreact, or hyperreact is a nicer way to say it. I was hyperreactive to all that stuff. And then my nervous system would kick in, because our brains don't speak English, right? Our brains don't, or Spanish or French or Hebrew or anything else, right? Our brains only have our five senses to rely on. So if what I'm looking at on Facebook, or I'm hearing outside, my apartment, or I'm thinking, that is all sending danger messages to my brain. My fight or flight response gets activated. Then you have a surge in hormones, and it's like a perfect storm. The soup of stress hormones and sex hormones that are going on in our bodies, for some of us, is unbearable. And in the book, I talk about some research I found that really kind of put all these ideas together. So I don't know if you'd be interested in me discussing the science behind it, because it really is practical.
The science is practical, which is
Yeah.
great, because you can
So,
implement it. The thing is with the book as well, I want to keep rereading it and rereading it, because the more you delve, the more you pick up, and the more you can implement it whilst you're in that zone. So you also delve a lot into Freud, and I can't believe how much we've been suppressed as women over the years by him and his teachings and everybody that's brought into it, as much as the rest that goes into that suppression. In a nutshell, because there's a lot and it's all really fascinating, can you condense a few of your sort of key findings?
it's funny, when The subtitle is in Why Freud Was Wrong, which actually got my book as a #1 bestseller because Amazon kindly put it in the Freud section, and I beat Freud at his own work. So I was like,
Yay!
yay! It was kind of ironic. I find that hilarious. But one of my teachers is a psychiatrist. He's been in clinical practice for over 50 years, and he kind of told me off a little bit for saying Freud was wrong,
Mm-hmm.
because Freud was one of the first people to see that we're experiencing our thinking. It's just that he didn't go anywhere with that. He just got caught up in the analyzing and the psychoanalysis, and all that stuff. He didn't really take it any further. Whereas, now we've gotten a lot more insight into how the mind works. So Freud, one of my first favorite facts about Freud, which blew my mind, was that in 1886 or something like that, I forget the numbers, but Freud destroyed all his personal papers because he was nervous that in the future some biographer was going to catch hold of something like Freud was insecure like everybody else. And he thought his biographers would report things on him that he didn't want people to know. Now, that's kind of a fairly reasonable thought for someone who's famous. But in 1886, Freud hadn't done anything yet. He just graduated from medical school, and nobody knew who he was. And yet he knew he was going to be famous, and he didn't know what for. He had to find something to be like. So being famous was one of his, that was his goal. His goal wasn't to help humanity with their human suffering. His goal was to be famous. And so right from the beginning, I find him quite suspect. And it was funny when I was reading lots of research and biographies of Freud, the words that were jumping out were like insecure. He had a messiah complex. He was dishonest. He was a plagiarist. Like most of his ideas weren't original. They came from, either Greek philosophers or from the, Catholic churches about confession. And that's what analysis, was essentially at the beginning. So I had very little respect for him. And then his attitude towards women was that we are defective, that we are not trustworthy, that that our experiences are not have no value, that because we're so emotional, therefore we're not logical like men, and so dismissed women, even though that was really what he based his career on. And the other thing that I discovered about him early on was that he actually did, I give him credit, he did see that most women's anxiety and depression and trauma was coming from their terrible life circumstances. Even very aristocratic, rich Viennese women who, very privileged in many ways, were being raped by their husbands, incest, some terrible things were happening behind closed doors. And back then, nobody's talking about it. Not even, 10, 15 years ago, people weren't talking about it. And he actually did write a paper on this. And nobody wanted to hear that because most of his clients, husbands, fathers, were, rich Viennese aristocracy, and he wanted to be friends with them. And he's saying that they are, mistreating the women in their lives. And so he denied it. He kind of backtracked his theory that it was because of women's, abuse. And he kind of just pushed that aside because it didn't make him popular. Remember, being popular was what he wanted, not helping women. And so he kind of set back the women's cause and women's liberation, if you want, by probably 50 or 100 years, because even though he had the information, he knew it. He was more concerned with his own career and his own development than getting that out and helping women escape those terrible situations. So on many levels, I found him to be a coward, a cocaine addict, many things. And then so when I see today, people say that they're not Freudian, but there's so many elements to psychology today that people still use and still people point to that come from Freudian ideas, like suppressed rage, like the subconscious is going to get you if you don't understand it. We're still encouraged to do journaling to get to the root of our feelings. That all comes from a Freudian idea that there's some kind of dark beast or conflict inside of us that's going to get us if we don't find it, but it's hidden. So there's I personally cannot subscribe to a higher power, God, loving being, whatever you want to call
Mm.
that would design us with such a painful source. I can't subscribe to a belief system that is so out to get you. I choose to believe in that we have innate well-being. And the biggest contradiction I can see to Freud's ideas is if you think about someone who's had a near-death experience, for example, someone, I don't know if you're familiar with Anita Morjani, for example, her book, she wrote a book called Dying to Be Me. It's a stunningly beautiful book. It's about her out-of-body experience when she was dying of cancer, and she was actually declared dead. And she writes, most of the book is about her experiences being free of her pain-ridden body. And she talks about glory and magnificence and, all these beautiful images of being free of her body, like she couldn't find the edges of who she was. And like, it's such a cliche, but anybody who's had a near death experience, they always talk about the light at the end of the tunnel. They talk about glory and magnificence. So when Freud's talking about conflict and dark beasts, that's who we really are. Those two ideas just don't go together. So personally, I choose to believe that we are magnificent and we are glory, and we happen to be in these human bodies right now, which sometimes can, hurt and get confused and need medical help. But when you understand how that's happening, I think that's why my anxious thinking went away. I think it's why my pain went away. Understanding how something works, that thought is always moving. I am not my thoughts. And it's only when I identify with them that I get into difficulty. When you can step back and be an observer and watch that go by, then there's no need for analysis or reframing or writing or any of that stuff now. I've just learned that my mind can heal itself whenever I become aware that I get caught up, which we all do sometimes.
What does good health from midlife onwards look like for you now, particularly given where you are and today?
Yeah, good health to me is being content. I spent so much of my life wishing it was different. I had outfits for when it's different, when, that walk on the beach, or, like the soundtrack that's going to go with my life when it looks the way I think it should be. And, and, as I did a lot of this, self-help work, I did really come to see how much of a perfectionist I am. And perfectionism isn't about, getting all your pencils lined up in the right color and like you're alphabetizing your books or something. Perfectionism, I've realized, is about noticing when things are wrong. I have the kind of mind that's always noticing that could be better. It shouldn't be that way. If only you followed the rules, then you wouldn't be complaining, and that is also producing a lot of stress and like sending the brain a lot of danger messages. So good health to me, good mental health, good physical health is really about being in the moment and being content with what I have. And, menopause has changed my body a little bit. I'm a little plumper around the middle than I used to be. I was flat chested my whole life. I was a double A. I could never find a bra to fit. And now I have cleavage, which is weird to me. But, you know, I would have wanted that, in my twenties. And now it's like, whatever. Um, and just, going with the flow, being able to be okay with that, like, and, and, people say like being okay with not being okay. I mean, I don't know that I think it's healthy to, sit in uncomfortable feelings and try and be okay with it. I don't see that that's beneficial, because why would you want to sit in anger or sadness deliberately? But now that I see that emotions are always moving, that they're actually a signal, they're letting me know the quality of my thinking, I've learned I don't have to be frightened of them. Sydney Banks, who I said, put all these ideas together that I share, his most famous quote is, "If only people could learn not to be afraid of their own experience, that would change the world." So, like this morning when I woke up and there were jet fighters flying over, and there's been planes going by all day long taking soldiers to the south to, to defend the country. The sirens are going off, there are booms, and, the building shaking. I think it's normal and natural to be a little bit anxious. I think that's common sense, that is being human. being okay with what we're feeling, I think that to me is good health and good mental health. And then when that's not happening, coming back to this moment where I'm okay. So, my body is functioning probably better now than it has for a couple of decades. I get the occasional hot flush, I get the occasional tension in my shoulders, and I just see it now as just like my body's just doing its thing. I don't react, I can respond, which is very different. And good health to me is like responding to my physical body, to my environment, my situation, my family, my friends, with common sense and wisdom. Wisdom is I think common sense is a highly underrated virtue these days. Um, and wisdom, we all have it. Everybody has the same access to wisdom. It just depends where I'm holding in my level of understanding.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And you're so right. And I feel that coming into the wisdom and settling into the wisdom that we have, it's more accessible as we grow older
Hmm.
and something to be
Yeah.
appreciated and enjoyed. Where can people find you, Hannah?
Thank you. So I'm on Facebook. You just can put my name in. I have a couple of Facebook groups with a few thousand people in it where I post, comments about this kind of stuff all the time. I have a website, which is my name. It's channastudley.com, which is spelled CHANASTUDLEY.com. And there you can find out about all my programs. I have coaching packages and the thing I'm most excited about right now is a few months ago, I started a women's membership group, and we do a group coaching session once a week. We're doing a book study. We just finished Very Well, and we did a book study on Very Well, and all the recordings are posted there. They're all logged, so you can put in the search button and find them. And it's a wonderful group of women, very supportive and very safe. And I also have a Pilates teacher who posts a class once a week. And there's a forum where you can post questions and comment. And I also do little thought for the day videos that I post all the time. And it's only $25 a month, which is, I think, a huge bargain for all of that. And you can access everything's recorded in case you miss something. And so, yeah, you can contact me through my website. And the three books I have are all on Amazon. Just put my name in, and the books are all there. And I'm currently working on a new book, which is not a story. It's more of a textbook. It's called Beyond Diagnosis, and I've collected 45 stories of people around the world who have recovered from serious mental health diagnosis, from psychosis and OCD and ADHD, even PMDD, which is the most severe form of premenstrual tension. And they've all when I say recovered, I mean not needing treatment. They're not coping. They're living their best lives. And so that book hopefully will be out in the spring. So if anybody wants to know about that book, just drop me an email, and which is my name at Gmail, and I'm happy to put you on the list to be notified about that book, because I think it's really going to really like break down some barriers and old ideas about how mental health is not a life sentence. We all have innate health underneath all that stinky thinking. We can get well.
I will add myself to that
Yeah.
list straight away. That sounds deeply
Mhm.
fascinating. But I love your
Thank
book
you.
very well, and shall continue rereading and rereading and rereading. It's terrific. So thank you. And thank you very much indeed for your time today. I wish you all the safety and
Thank you.
peace in the
Thank you.
world.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure.
I will put where you can find Hannah in the show notes. And a final note on Real Menopause Therapy. Remember, subscription is currently free and sign up is obligation free as well. Have a look around and see how it works. Go to bit.ly/RM therapy. That's bit.ly/RM therapy, capital R, capital M, capital T. Thank you for listening. I wish you all well, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.